are live. Welcome back to another edition of the Mecca of Banter podcast. Today, I am your host, Henry Wind. You can find me on Twitter at Henry Wind. I say it every week, and it's true today. It's a great week to be a United fan. We have a great episode entail for you all. Thank you all for listening. But before we get to the run of show, let's check in. Hoov, how you doing over there, man?
Great, pal. We're doing pretty well. All things considered, you got to take a step back sometimes and ignore the BS and the Twitter, and just appreciate where you're at with the season being the way it's been. So
I wish you could
all
set
right.
your background on these podcasts to just your screen time on Twitter every week. Then that would probably give us a gauge of like how well you're doing weekly.
It's too much. It's toxic, but we kind of live for it. We're
It's
gonna
a
enjoy it.
love-hate relationship for sure.
Always has been. Even normal Twitter, man. I spend too much time on it. I just want to be famous. It's not going to happen, but
Not yet.
we're doing our best.
Not yet. My friend on the other side of London, Lucas Winkleman, how you doing today?
What's up, baby?
What's up,
Wings
baby?
here at LCW21 on Twitter. Feeling good out of the FA Cup. Obviously talked about that last pod, but excited to talk transfer window, how that ended up. Stoked to be here.
Yeah, stoked to have you. And finally, my United brother, Connor Sandobri.
What's going on, fellas? Your boy Dobes. Happy to be here. It's your boy C-Dobes 10. For our first time in a long time, we're the famous Man United, and we're going to Wembley. We're in the final. So it's been a good week so far. Like I said, one game at a time, but definitely feels great to actually be in the first final we can be in. So moving
Darn
right
right.
along, boys. Moving right along.
So good. So good. Well, welcome, gentlemen. Happy to have you here. Like I said, we have a great episode today. We're going to kick off, diving into City and Spurs now that we have our resident Spurs fan in the chat. We are going to discuss our transfer windows for our respective teams. We're not going to dive into too many other teams. We might have a couple call outs, but we're really going to dive deeply into our teams. And then we're going to finish up with our own version of Factor Cap today. So without further ado, Hoov, I'm going to throw it over to you. You all play Manchester City this Sunday on an absolute must win for you, I'll say, and probably a must win for City as well. How do you see it going?
Yeah, man. It's weird. City's the weirdest matchup, I think, for Spurs. They historically play them really well. And then, every once in a while they'll get blown out 3-0 or, look like they're going to take a lead through half and then give up 3 goals in 2 minutes. So it's
hypothetically speaking, not saying that that's ever happened before, but
no, not anytime recent either. It's a mixed bag. And it's definitely, we're just not in the season, the point in the season where I'm like, must win. Like, you see this one come up on the schedule and you're like, okay, what's in front of it and around it? And Spurs have done okay with what's been in front of it. And you just can't if you lose this game, that can't linger. Like, you don't lose to Pep's City and get a run of form, go down because of, you got beat by one of the best teams in the world. So I think everyone knows that. Everyone wants to win. It's at home. It's the best time to play them, best place to play them. I think Pedro Porro starts. Obviously, the new that'd be awesome. The new right wing back plays from Sporting in Portugal. And it's one of those things where you buy a player and you know that he immediately fits in and becomes the best player in that position on your team. So that's cool. And I think that's where you beat City, is on those overlapping wings where guys are out of position on the City side. So that's how they've done it in the past. It's always been 1-2 pass, in the defensive third to find Kane, to find Sonny on a run. Like that's, you look at the last 3 or 4 wins they've had against City, those have been a majority of the goals. So I think the way that they set up bodes well. But then, you sit and you play defense for the entire game. So it's an interesting one. Conte got his gallbladder removed this week. Hope he's doing okay.
I was getting ready to ask you about that. Who's coaching the squad?
We got the assistant. I forget his name, but he took media duties last week because Conte wasn't feeling well because apparently his gallbladder was leaking. And he also was in charge during the 2-0 win over Marseille. So I don't feel like we're losing too much. It's always nice to see Conte barking on the sidelines and just being the psychotically passionate human that he is. Everyone kind of grows accustomed to, loving that. They have Spurs literally tweet out after every win a Conte cam. And it's a 4-minute video of him just being on the sideline. And it's must-see television every time that I get it. So that's a bummer. Guys had a rough year, but I think, you don't want to call it like a new manager bounce because it's not. But when you have an assistant in position and a sick manager who, from what I know, everyone is just in love with. They love the guy. That's a good, that's a good thing to rally around. And you win that game, you post a picture in the locker room and you send it to Conte, and that's,
of course,
that's that kind of win. So I don't feel that bad about it. I'm not stressed. They could beat us 3-0 and I'm still going to walk away feeling okay. The rest of the season's in front of us. So it'll be interesting. I think it's a tough matchup and it's a must win for City. So that's where the big issue is. I think that they're not in a position anymore to drop any more points. But we're also talking about a team that's sputtering a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
They definitely didn't look great against, what Winks might say is something of a B-side for Arsenal. There were a lot of subbed in guys for them, and they didn't look as conjoined as they usually do. But City were playing most of the dogs, so it's weird. You never want to say you're confident going into that matchup, but this is about as confident as you can get.
I was about to say in previous years, looking at the City side and how strong they've been, this has to be the most excited any of us have been going into a match against them.
I think that's what's so funny about City, though, is because we watched them play their last few games and we say that they're sputtering or they just don't look like themselves. But at the same time, at any given game, they can turn it on and just be that, they have the players to just turn it on. Turn it on any single week. And we saw in the first leg, not to bring it up, not the first leg, but the first game that you guys played a couple weeks ago, you guys were down, went up 2-0, and then City down 2 goals just turns into a completely different gear and turns it on. So City haven't done that from the start as of recently, but I don't think any of us would be surprised if they do come out from the start and all of a sudden look like that. And I think that's kind of what Wings, I'm sure are scared of, but not only that, but the rest of the league is kind of scared of that City does hit that gear because they become just a different team when they do hit it.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. The difference, and I don't, it's just a classic saying, the difference between good and great teams are being able to get results on games that you don't deserve to win. So City showed up for 30 minutes of that Spurs game and they punked them and they just literally shoved it on their throats. And Pep came off and had his post-match presser and was like, we didn't deserve to win today. No stones.
We ain't talking about John.
No guts.
No guts.
We shouldn't have even gotten 3 points. So, you're talking about the best of the best. And it takes them 20 minutes. They could look terrible an entire game. And then 20 minutes later, you catch yourself 2-1 and it's over.
What is Richie's situation? Is he healthy? Because I know I've been seeing, I don't know if he's training, if he's not training.
So he was supposed to start. Conte came out and said that he was going to start for the last FA Cup game against Portsmouth. And he didn't because he picked up a knock. And I don't know. Everyone's kind of tired of hearing that. So there's not really been any discussion. There's been no media or anything to say that he will or won't play. You would assume that if he was ready to play last game and dead-legged himself the training before, and I don't know. The Spurs fitness team has been less than reliable this year, so you just don't know. I'm begging for the guy to play. I'm begging for him to play as a 9, but we're not gonna see that happen as long as Harry Kane's on the field. So it's weird. I think Richarlison's great, and we all saw him in the World Cup, and he's another one of those players that's just relentless on the pressure and gets rewarded for it. And that's huge in a Conte side. So
Yeah.
you want that energy. You want him to be doing that boosts the team. This guy you hate playing against. So I think we're missing out on his personality, if anything. But frankly, Sonny finished the man of the match against, Portsmouth or whatever. Had played great and played
Great goal.
great
Vintage.
goal. Looked really good. Played in like a hybrid false nine with Perisic at times, which was really interesting. And bossed it. So Spurs get Sonny back. If you get an informed Sonny, that's a dangerous team. That's a really, really dangerous team. So that's what they've been missing the whole year, I think, is a left winger who's been consistent and a right winger who's been healthy. But other than that, City.
I'm excited for this one, though. I'm so excited. I feel like you guys always play them extremely well, or it's just, if not well, it's just a great game. Always.
Yeah, it's a fun game.
Yeah.
I have vivid memories to last year. I was in Kansas City with some buddies who weren't huge football fans, but it was City, Spurs at about 10:30, 11 a.m. We were all pretty hungover, getting brunch, keeping it together. Harry Kane puts in an 89th winning header into the corner.
Incredible.
And the bender begins.
I'm screaming by myself at Chicken and Pickle in Kansas City. And there's nobody in the room has any idea what's going on. And I just look at my friends and I ordered 6 tequila shots. I didn't say anything. I was just like, yes. So those moments can happen. You keep those as a football fan. Those are the ones you don't forget. So
yeah, and with Spurs, like they're just so few and far between that you really remember them. The boo roasted. The real storyline here, though, I think that I'm surprised you went all the way through that preview without mentioning it. The real storyline is Kane versus Haaland on this one. We'll see if Nick Hayflinger is avenged, or if the rest of us,
eat our words. I don't know, man. I was pissed I wasn't on that last podcast because I was listening to it the morning after on the way to work, like screaming in my car, like no, like losing my mind. But I don't feel the need to dive too deep. We've mixed what the question was, and it's who you're writing the blank check for. Obviously, it's going to be Haaland because he's a kid and he's going to score goals at an unbelievable clip. That's fine. Henry, you sent something earlier, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it, but it was a really, really eloquent way to compare the two. You said Harry Kane can do everything that Haaland can do, but Haaland can't do everything Harry Kane can do. That's factual. Somewhere during that we missed it. Yes, Haaland's a great striker and poacher, so is Kane, but Haaland can't drop deep, affect the play line as a 10 or false 9. And I sent the clip of Harry Kane in that game where he bagged 2 against City. It's a 5-minute clip of just class. Just the dude was oozing it. And it was sprayed ball after flicked pass to 1-2. And, he had 3 or 4 opportunities in net. One of them was offsides. One of them probably should have finished. And then he bagged the other 2, in spectacular fashion. And Nick's comment was, that's fine. 15 seconds of that clip was him scoring goals. He should have scored 3. Haaland scores 3. The rest of it's him just cutting City open. I was like, he's cutting City open. You're talking about a striker, a number 9, a 6-foot big Englishman who can spread balls like that against one of the best teams in the world. And we're not saying that that's not valuable. That's it. I don't need to dive too deep. I think everyone can take this argument with a grain of salt, but Harry Kane's the better player. Harry Kane's the better player. It's personal. Harry Kane's the better player. Haaland is finishing on a City team, and he's finishing goals that he should finish. I think the thing that you have to look at is that he's put up there to be the guy to finish the tap-ins. Like that's his job. They don't want him deep. They don't want him on the wings. They don't want him sending crosses or spreading the ball. Like they want him as close to the net as humanly possible at all times, and it works. So that's what you're looking at. You ask Harry Kane to go to Man City. I still don't think he has the same year statistically as Haaland, but I think City are way better because he's going to be doing more of that. And at times when you rely on a guy up top to sit and score these tap-ins and he doesn't, he gets 7 other touches in the game and effectively, lost players. So it's the argument stuff.
I said it last week. I think that's the thing that's sort of scary about Erling Haaland is like, obviously the hardest thing in football to do is like score goals, and he does it at a rate that nobody's done before. I think the thing that's scary about him is and I'm interesting to see how he develops in his career, to see if he does end up trying to become better on the ball, because he's not somebody that's going to take the ball, run at you, like do a step over, beat you one way and score. That's just not him right now. And I think if he can add that piece to his game, if he can drop a little deeper, help combine, if he can start to pick those passes, if he can start to do all those things and really come the complete rounded striker, like he can do the hardest thing that's possible right now and score. But if he can add that other things to his game, like he has the potential to be one of the greatest, like all around strikers of all time. Like the goals are part of it. It's the adding that other elements to the game that are really scary just because he's that young already. Like,
and it's nice that he is under Pep, and I know that we've said it before to develop him, but in moments against United, he tried a little bit. The second leg, he tried a little bit to drop deep, and like you could see how physically uncomfortable he was playing like on the half turn, like actually uncomfortable, didn't know how to do it, which is fine considering his age and knowing that like on the other side of that is scoring all of those goals. But right now I think Harry Kane's clear in that department. And the more I hear you talk, I mean, obviously I don't pay attention to Spurs every week like you do, Hoof, but the more I hear you talk, the more I'm just so surprised that, well, on one hand, I'm not surprised because it's Conte, but I'm surprised that like no one has tried the formation of like just having like, Richie be that 9 and Kane play the 10 role. It's not like you guys have like a world-class Cam who's like out there in the 10 position, playing that position like week in, week out. I think you just give Kane that freedom to float like up top, and like Kevin De Bruyne last year, where he would just find himself. Dobes, you brought it up last year, or you brought it up last week, but like Kevin De Bruyne would find himself in the 9 position all the time last year, even though he was playing a Cam. I just think that would be Harry Kane's bread and butter, and if Conte would ever get out of his rigidity, I think that'd be dangerous. But that's just me.
Yeah, I'm with you. And then you have to kind of look at the math on it. So what you've got to keep Son on the field. You've got to keep Kulusevski on the field. Harry Kane and Richarlison playing together is great, ideally. So that either means you lose a guy on the midfield side because Conte refuses to switch out of the back 5, which I think is fine. If that's your system, that's your system. But he won't play a back 4 ever, I don't think. And that's the issue. So you're pulling Bentancur or Højbjerg, who mostly provide defensive cover in a counterattacking team that's, mildly important. But I agree completely that, you have to switch formations. And I think sometimes that's another thing that cuts teams apart is when something's not working, you change it. Statistically, Spurs are 5th, right? Like something is kind of working. Yeah. But when it doesn't, when things fall apart, when they go down, sometimes it just you can't keep, what's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So sometimes that's what you peg yourself with a Conte guy. And so his inter team did what Pep's team does now, and that's win games when you don't deserve it. Like they won the Serie A because they were getting scruffy 1-0 results. And I just don't know if the Premier League's the league where you can do that and expect to win titles. I think it works in hindsight, but a little bit Leeds-esque and Bielsa ball to the point of you just get beat down over and over and over, and then you start to lose guys. Like his regiment hasn't lasted more than 3 years in any other club for a reason. But within those 3 years, it was great. So
it's interesting. We'll see how it goes this weekend, but
sure will.
We're gonna transition now, gentlemen, into our transfer portion, and here's how we're gonna go. We're gonna start off with you, Lucas. We're gonna hear about Arsenal, then we're gonna hear about Spurs, and finally we'll end with United. What I want from each of you is I want the grade. I want the grade that you give your club's transfer window, A, B, C, D, or F. why, and then don't forget to recap who you actually signed, what they bring to the team, etc. So Winks, start us off with the grade, who you signed and why. Floor is yours.
Yeah, and it's giving a grade is tough sometimes because there's different ways to look at it, right? Like how much money you spent overall, how many big name players you got, or whether or not your team signed players to meet a certain need. So from the perspective of signing big name, high value players, I think B is appropriate. But with what we needed, I'm going to give us a B plus or an A. We spent $58 million on 3 players with the intention of depth, and more depth. I think Arteta articulated it well in an interview, and I'll just echo it. There was no reason to disrupt our starting 11. Everybody's obviously meshing well. We're doing really well in the Premier League right now. So there was, although we were going after Mudryk, there wasn't, aside from him, there wasn't a huge need for us to sign someone that was going to come in aside from that striker position and start in the starting 11. Now that since the new year started, Nketiah is in incredible form, and maybe it's somebody that's meshing well enough that we don't necessarily need to replace until Gabby Jesus comes back. But with that being said, I'll give us a B plus or an A on the objective that we needed to sign depth on our team. So like I said, we signed 3 guys. Starting off with the first guy we signed, we all know him well, 28-year-old Belgian forward from Brighton, Leandro Trossard. I think that because of all 3 of these players' potential, or actually rather because of the potential of a lot of these young players that are signing for tons of money in the Prem, mostly going to Chelsea, it's exciting to sign those young, expensive players. But with Trossard, we've talked about it before. We know what we're getting. We've got now expensive and young players in Bukayo Saka, Martin Odegaard, Gabriel Martinelli. So it makes much more sense tactically to sign depth here, and we understand that we're getting a ready now player. And from what we've seen already, he looks like he's been playing for Arsenal for years, to be honest, coming in late in the United game and then playing a good chunk of minutes against Manchester City. Not to say that we still shouldn't look at younger talent, but we signed him for 3.5 years, and he clearly fits right in and is super versatile. He can play anywhere on the left. We saw him, like I said, sub for Martinelli against United and start there against City, but he can also be used as a 9. I feel like in Odegaard's position, we've seen him float there several times for Brighton throughout the season and throughout last year. So I'm a huge fan of his. He's always been really fun to watch, and I'm excited that we're getting him in his late prime. So number 1. Number 2, Jakub Kiwior, $20 million, 22-year-old Polish center back from Spezia. He's essentially the left-footed Ben White. He's 6'2", versatile at the back. And like many of our
was that meant to be an insult, right? That was an insult, right?
No. 20 million, way too much. God,
yeah,
dang.
wasn't Ben White like 70 million?
Yeah, so 20 mils, 20 mils a bargain, but
they evaluated that after a couple seasons. They said never again.
Damn, that English tax is so crazy, bro.
It's
so crazy.
But he's I actually really like this kid. Looking more into him, I obviously didn't know a lot about him. We watch Spezia games every now and then, but don't know a lot about this guy. So in doing research and articles and stuff like that, apparently in some national league games, he was at practices for Poland, and Robert Lewandowski wondered who this kid was and in practice, and then when he saw him in a game, he immediately told the team at Barcelona to sign this kid because of how much potential he's got. And so knowing that a guy who's gonna obviously go down as one of the top players ever, best goal scorers, knowing that he sees that much potential in him just excites the heck out of me, and is going to, I'm excited to see him get some minutes. And like I said, it's nice to have a left-footed center back as well sometimes. Traditionally, we don't see that a ton. I think Leach is left-footed, isn't he?
Yep.
Yeah. So aside from him, I couldn't really name many others off the top of my head, but I think that he provides a versatility in the back that, if needed, he could play that left back position too, like Ben White has kind of transferred to right back. So, so excited to see him. And plug, he is dating the twerk champion.
God.
Some sort of, so good for him. He's winning on and off the field, but
He's Polish.
Arsenal social media is about to be crazy.
Hold on, he's Polish?
I don't know. I think it's like the world twerking champion. He's dating.
No, but is the kid Polish?
Yeah, he's Polish.
And he's dating the world twerking champion, and there ain't no way in hell that she's not from Southern America. So
Good for him.
This this kid's got some riz, bro.
Yeah. Got something. But lastly, Jorginho from Chelsea, 12 mil.
Jorginho.
Kind of came out of nowhere. I think that when we first heard rumors about it, I at least was like, yeah, this for sure isn't going to happen. Didn't think too much about it. I kind of wrote it off immediately, because we had been going after Caicedo and some younger guys. And so when that came through and I saw 12 million and I thought about it more, the important thing that I wanted to get across was that he's not a replacement for Thomas Partey. Again, it's depth. He's a replacement for Mohamed El Neni, the Egyptian king. So was he my first choice? No. But again, Arteta focusing on depth will allow us to go after Declan Rice or Tielemans or someone else in the summer. We signed Jorginho for 1.5 years. And I think that he brings a very high soccer IQ and title experience to our locker room. He's played in a very boring Chelsea side system the last few years, and that we've talked about several times has kind of been without an identity. Mm-hmm. And he's been a little injury prone, but we'll see how he meshes into our system. I think this could be a bit of a career revitalization, if you will, for him for the 1.5 years that we signed him coming into this team of young guys. And I think I sent the tweet to the Mecca, but Cucurella and I think a few other guys too even said that he's the smartest soccer player on Chelsea before realizing that he wasn't on Chelsea anymore. So I think that all of that combined is something that a lot of these players are looking at their first title run in their career because they're all so young, right? So I hope that he provides a lot in the locker room. And I know that Thomas Partey's not going to be able to play every minute the rest of the season either. So granted, we don't have as many games as, United does. Good for you guys, but
thanks, man.
But I'm more excited than I was when I first heard the rumors.
I'm kind of like with you, Winks. I think the more like when you first hear, obviously having watched Jorginho play this year, it's been tough to watch. And I think that's more of just where Chelsea is at with their injuries than it is like Jorginho. And I think when you sort of like analyze this deal as a whole, like I think the big piece is like the 1.5 to where he can come in, he can be a depth piece. He can be a leader in the locker room who's won with Italy, who's won with Chelsea. And if it works out, it works out. If not, you're not tied to the player for some crazy amount of time that locks you in. I also think what's extremely interesting is that I was reading that when Arteta was at City, that Arteta wanted to bring Jorginho to City. So Arteta has always been a fan of what Jorginho brings. And I think he's a little bit different than Partey to where I think Partey excels is because he's so athletic. He's kind of like a Casemiro. He can break up the play. Where Jorginho is, like we've been kind of sending it back and forth. He can be that orchestrator in games to where, like I think if you're playing a team where you're going to have a ton of the ball, that's a game for Jorginho where he can excel. He can help dictate the game. He can help orchestrate the game. Like when you're playing it like against the Man City or Man United, like that's your game for your Thomas Partey to come in, break up the play. So I think for the cost and how long the deal is, I think it could be the perfect like sort of fit to where, I mean, hey, if you guys win the title, Jorginho's loved by Arsenal fans forever. It's the perfect move. It's the absolute thing. Plus, I also think like you never really know what's going to happen with Thomas Partey going into the summer. Like this allows you guys, and I don't mean to say it to give you shit, but like he's out on bail for the 3rd time.
Yeah.
And I think if you guys do have to go actually splash in the summer, like this gives you that financial space to be able to go splash on a defensive midfielder or on another like number 8, or if you want to go get another number 9 or whatever the need becomes, this leaves you with the freedom of not having overly spent now while still putting you guys in a good spot to go run after a title.
Dude, Prison FC is gonna look crazy with Gylfi Sigurdsson too, bro. That's gonna be a hard ass team.
Well, Winks, one of the things that I want to call out, I don't know if I disagree at all with your grades. I would love if my club signed 3 players, legitimately. I would love that. That'd be so sick. The one thing that I'd be curious about, because we went through it, Dobes and I went through it in the summer. We spent 3 months chasing after Frankie de Jong, and it ended up okay, us signing Casemiro and Antony in the end, but we saw how much it hurt us. And it wasn't like you all went out and splashed crazy amounts, but it was very well known that you went after 2 players that you didn't get. You went after Mudryk and you went after Caicedo. Very public bids, very everyone knew about it, and you didn't get it. And so does that influence the grade at all? Does that because to me, I would look at that as 2 of the top prospects that you all had going into the window, and you didn't get either one. So that for me would be maybe taking it down a little bit. What are your thoughts?
And that's kind of what I was talking about at the beginning, when there's a lot of different ways to look at it. High value, how much money you spent, and I think that's for sure what separated it. Obviously being tied down to somebody for that much money for that long is tough to stomach sometimes, especially when you don't have, oil money or anything like that to back it up, and go and buy somebody else if you need to. Must be nice. But I think we all know that feeling. But,
yeah.
But yeah, I think that was a difference from an A+ to a B+. But again, stoked with who we got, and obviously we haven't seen Kiwi or Jorginho play yet, so too early to tell.
The Trossard move it's kind of like you said, he's prem proven. You don't have to there's no time for him to adapt. And truthfully, when you're going after a title, you don't have time to bring in a player and say, hey, adapt to the prem. Mudryk may end up being an amazing player, a top 10 player in the prem, worth his 100 million. But at the same time, that is a risk. And for that price tag, that I think it was smart for Arsenal, whether they did bid extremely high and just not get him. I almost think that Trossard, for going to win a title now, is almost a better move versus Mudryk in the long term. He could be a better move in the long term, but I think Trossard, having seen what he brought to Brighton this year, 6 months ago, I just think it's smarter just in terms of the whole goal this year's title. And I think he gives you the best shot.
Yeah, I don't think that prem proven signings are talked about enough with all of these.
Definitely not.
With all of these 18, 19, 20-year-old $100 million players. So
for sure.
Yeah, I meant to kick off this whole segment with bringing in this I don't even want to say fact, but just this piece of information. I just forgot to, but historically speaking, we look at Manchester City and then Barcelona and Real Madrid as the big spenders of the world. And every year, that's what we look at, and what's kind of what we feel consistent. This year, the Premier League outspent every other league by a long shot. And granted, the majority of it was Chelsea. Don't get me wrong. We know that. But even looking at, Arsenal bidding up to 70 for Caicedo and up to 90 for Mudryk, that's still a pretty penny, and not to say if they got Mudryk, they may not have gone to Caicedo, but that's still a lot of money that the Premier League is throwing around. But historically speaking, a Trossard move in January would be an unreal signing, and it would be up there of historically speaking in the Prem. That would be a signing of the year kind of signing. A Premier League proven 28-year-old in his prime, can play anywhere across the top 4. Who's shaking his head, but historically speaking, that would be what the Premier League does in January, because people don't do a whole lot of business in January. So I think that was a good signing. So overall, you gave a B+ to average out the 2. B+ for Arsenal.
Yes, sir.
Trossard threw a fit, bro. He just threw a fit. You don't sign him for that cheap if the manager there has stones the current Brighton coach, and that. It's a great signing. And I'm not gonna discredit that. And I do agree that it's probably smarter than Mudryk, but he doesn't get you don't get that transfer ever unless that exact scenario happens where he throws a bitch fit and the manager doesn't play no games. So it's like, yeah, take him, whatever. Like we will accept considerably lower because I believe in this project so much that he's toxic to this dressing room. So
yeah, it's not worth it.
No, but
not worth it.
Good signing, whatever.
Yeah. So B+ for Arsenal. We'll see how the rest of the year shakes out for you all. Hoove, going to you. Spurs signed someone, so
Let's
that's
go,
cool.
Hoove.
Yeah, man.
Even
Yeah,
if
man.
that's exciting for you.
Yeah.
You know, so give us your thoughts. I want the grade, I want the players, and your thoughts.
I was gonna say D. I'm gonna go D+ for a couple reasons. I don't think you shouldn't have to be in a point, and I think Arsenal's in the same position. You shouldn't have to be in a point where you hinge your season on January, right? Like January is for filling guys in to where you see deficiencies currently. So from that aspect, we got a right wing back that immediately is better than all of our other right wing backs and can be if he's the guy that we think he is, Pedro Porro might be unbelievable. I think he could be a classy player opposite side of even Perisic. So we're talking some really good quality there. That's a great signing. The way they went about it and the fact that there was a $45 million or 45 million euro release clause, and we'd known that for the entire month, and Daniel Levy still penny pinched over the entire thing, frustrates me, but that's not anything new. We ended up getting him on a loan with obligation to buy. And I do think it was a Romero structured type deal to where the obligation comes after X amount of appearances or, just something like that. So it was more of a payment structure thing that Levy had his panties in a wad about. So I think that they will end up paying that. They paid $7 million now. They'll pay $38 million in summer if he hits his whatever marks, which I have no reason to see why he wouldn't be, because Emerson Royale is his competition. But on the same side of the token, the only reason I gave us a D+ is because we did ship off some guys. They mutually agreed to terminate Matt Doherty's
I was going to say, talking
contract.
about Doherty.
So in the scheme of things, I was shocked, right? I saw that news, and you like players at your club, whether or not they're good or bad. And I thought he was always a very, very, very average right wing back. And we never got the guy who was at Wolves, because the guy who was at Wolves was sick. He was bagging goals and was just actively involved in the attack. So it was weird. He's 32. He is playing behind the guy that we just bought already. Like, he immediately falls into number 2, I would say, on the depth list. They loaned out Jed Spence, which is good. If you're not going to play Jed Spence, get him out on loan.
Minutes. Yeah, get him some minutes.
He went to France. He's probably going to be the starting right back for I think it wasn't Lille.
Is it Rennes?
It was Rennes. Yeah.
Right.
So he goes into a side where I would assume he starts immediately at Rennes. And then you have Emerson Royale, who we bought from Barca for like 25 million and is 23. So where you cut the guy with some age, like, that's Deadwood. That's what you dream of as a Spurs fan. We've got Ben Davies and Eric Dyer still anchoring down on the back line, and we've got a 32-year-old right back. Cut the guy, get somebody new in. That's the only reason that I'm giving us a D+, because they let someone go. They let someone go that wasn't going to bring the squad forward. So I loved that. That was great. After I got over my short bit of emotional period of kind of liking the media I saw of Matt Doherty, that's great. He's going to go play at Atletico. It's going to be awesome. And then Danjuma. So I thought that one was interesting, and it's not a signing you would ever turn down. We signed a left winger who's in form from Spain to basically compete with our superior left winger who's out of form as all could be. And I think that's fantastic. Like, Sonny's never had someone who was going to challenge him for a position. And that's not anything against him. It's just that's how good he's always been. Mm-hmm. And then you have a year like this. You bring in a guy like Danjuma, who got on the score sheet in the first 15 minutes in an FA Cup game. Like, that's real competition. And that's what you beg for as a Big Six side, to be like, okay, we need competition and depth to be able to do anything legitimate. That was a good depth signing. it wasn't the position that we lacked, right? Like it wasn't the position where we were like desperate for somebody new to come in. Spurs are 4 or 5 players, I think, on the starting 11 short of being legitimate. You've got a center back, you know, if you want to look at the 5 at the back, you've got 2 center back spots that need to be replaced. Eric Dyer and Clement Lenglet's been fine, but you need a left-footed center back that's better than that guy. Ben Davies is irrelevant to me. I can't even believe he's still at the club. He's been there as long as I've been a Spurs fan, which is embarrassing. So unless you're Harry Kane, but he, you know, like we're missing. Hugo's got to go. I'm over Hugo. I love him. Club legend. You can accept that. He's one of the most capped players ever. Captain of France, one of the most capped French players ever. World Cup winner. Great. I'm so happy for him. He needs to go somewhere else. He's done. He's had his time. You need to get a David Raya or someone who can replace that spot. No one replaces your club captain, but a guy who you can put your chips on for years, right? Like having a goalie problem is the single worst problem in all of football. Like the last thing that you want is to have a revolving door of goalies, of keepers. So there's glaring holes on the Spurs team. They're positions that could have been picked up January, maybe not at the proficiency or price tag that they wanted, which clearly is all Spurs is about. We signed Beyonce before we signed a Eric Dyer replacement.
Incredible.
2 nights.
Awesome.
Who wants to go 2 nights at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in May? Beyonce, boys, we are
bringing in money,
doing
bro.
it. Yeah, and that's the other thing. Spurs Twitter panics. Well, there's a weird division between the old heads and everybody else, but there is a group of people that are like the Enoch and the ownership group are just in it for the money, which I agree completely that they are. Getting Beyonce and having these fight nights with Fury and doing these NFL games, that's a fucking good thing. Like put the spotlight on the club, put the spotlight on the stadium. Bring in external outside fans that global in any way possible, global brand, be the brand that you are, then back it up on the football field. Like that's the kicker, right? I said this a couple weeks ago, but they sell themselves as this just massive club, best facilities in the world, best stadium in the world, best whatever. And then they give up 4 goals to City in 20 minutes. And, we're not a serious anything. So, they made another a kid signing for the youth
From
team.
Chelsea, eh?
Yeah, I thought it was
striker.
Something. I thought it was Jude Bellingham's little brother for a second, but it wasn't. So, I didn't know much about him. I think he came from like Cardiff or something. I don't know.
Soonsup Bell.
Bell.
I think he's a striker. I'm pretty sure I saw that somewhere.
The next Harry Kane, maybe.
Sure. We've had like 5 of those, and they're all gone. So,
I actually rate the Danjuma signing, and the reason if Conte wasn't your coach, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense. But you look at like Danjuma coming from La Liga, playing for Villarreal, where they have historically been that side that has always like outworked the other team. They've never necessarily been the best. They're typically good on the ball, but defensively sound. He's coming into like a Conte system that is very much that, to where he's kind of already been there, done that, can already expect his role. When he does play, you know exactly what you're going to get out of him. And then Pedro Porro, like, I think that's a fantastic signing. Like, I do think Spence may be the guy for the future. And I would love United to have a guy like Spence, but like Porro's that guy that can come instantly, make your right side better, that is physically sound, that can get up and down the wing. What did you give your rating? Did you say a D?
A D+.
I gave it a D+.
D+. I would take your guys' window in a heartbeat.
I would give it at least a C.
I'll take a C-. There weren't as many movement. Like Conte says in the media, he's the club and himself have different visions. If Conte was in charge of those signings, we're talking about a completely different window. So I think Pedro Porro, you're right, and Pedro Porro, I think, comes from the exact same type of team in Sporting that does that and does it really, really well. So you're talking about 2 guys that fit in immediately in systems that work. And Porro more so, he's going to be expected immediately to be that guy.
Yep.
But if he's anything that we think he is, then he's going to.
He is that guy. The other thing, Hoove, that you didn't mention was Brian Hill went out on loan again to Sevilla, and I just feel like it's just Tottenham is just not his club. Like it's just not going to work out for him at Tottenham.
So I may agree. I think I rate Brian Hill. I think he's 20 pounds too light and in the wrong league. So
that's fair.
I think you're right completely. I think that he goes to, did he go to Valencia? Sevilla. And I think he did really well. I'm pretty sure they signed him from Sevilla originally because they put Eric Lamela in the same deal. So I think if Conte's not the manager, I think it's a similar situation. He plays in a different system. He's not this guy that you need that you want to like run onto balls to find Harry Kane in the middle. Like this kid wants the ball and he wants to go at you, which is great. But he's a small child. Like he's just a small boy. And the physicality of the Premier League doesn't allow for that to really be, unless you're Neymar and Jack Grealish shifty. Jack Grealish will beat you and get fouled. And Brian Hill showed moments of that. And I think that's his route and his path.
Yeah.
But you also just can't get manhandled off the ball every third time that you get it. So
you also have to be a crazy smart player. I don't know why, but Juan Mata is coming to mind all day today. Like just, thinking of him as a player, he's so small, little magician, but like he's not going to be the guy that's going to try to beat you off the dribble every single time. Yeah. He pops up in the spaces that he needs to, and he runs the field. Like you don't need to be like a super huge guy, but you have to be so smart. So if Brian Hill isn't going to get smarter as a player, then it's going to be really difficult for him to continue to like grow as a Premier League player. He might be better suited for Spain if that's the case.
I just hope he gets minutes and hits the gym, and then I truly think he could be a really good player. But tough system to come into, tough situation. You're behind Kulusevski and Richarlison, and and he wanted to play, and that was really the basis of the loan, was the fact that the kid was like, look, man, like I gotta get minutes. So I respect that, and I'm glad that they sent him out on loan. I think any player like that, to a certain degree, you want to build some sort of club or locker room atmosphere of like you have to want to be there, and Conte probably definitely does that. So the moment that you tell a guy like that, hey man, like I'm not getting enough minutes, I think I need to go somewhere and play, he's gonna be like, sure, yeah, let's do it. That's like no problem. So we'll go with the C-. I'll give the credit where it's due. A lot of holes on that roster.
A lot of holes. I think I agree with the C-. It's a good shout. Dobes, we're gonna throw it over to you with United. I'll chime in wherever I see fit, but I'm gonna let you run this one with United. What's the grade? Who did we bring in? Who left? What are your thoughts?
This is tough because this is like, I could sit here for an hour and talk to you guys about like our transfer situation. Grade, just to start, I'll give it like, I'm kind of with Hoove. I'll give it like a D+ or like a C-. Players we brought in, obviously you guys can see my background. We brought in Wakehorse, who's already played a few games. We brought him in earlier. And then we brought in the last time that we recorded, and so our fans listened, like Hen and I sat there and said, I doubt at all that we're going to do a single thing. And I think we, like, with the bottom of my heart, I truly, truly believe that.
Yeah.
And then it came out early Tuesday morning, Christian Eriksen, fuck Andy Carroll, Christian Eriksen out until early May or late April. And so United kind of went into panic mode, and we signed Sabitzer from Bayern. And I personally, with Sabitzer, I'm extremely happy with the signing. I think for specifically what we needed, I think he fills that role for us. And I think, there's been a lot of sort of heat, like, oh, well, he doesn't start for Bayern. He doesn't get a lot of team. It's like he's played 24 games this year in a Bayern midfield that is absolutely world-class. And so I think for our role, like, I think that he's exactly what we need. And I think losing Christian Eriksen is an absolutely massive, just because within Ten Hag's system this year, Eriksen has been the player that's played more minutes than anybody else on the team. Eriksson is second in the Prem currently with 7 assists behind, I think it's behind Kevin De Bruyne. And what Sabitzer brings is he has 10 lungs. You know, he's that guy that he's a workhorse. He can play the 8, he can play the 10, he can play the 6, he can play all 3 of those roles. And I think the Sabitzer signing is like has that like Ten Hag stamp on it, because I think you've seen United in the past to where we've made these sort of like last ditch signings or signings that we've needed and they've never made sense. Like we talked last week about a Gallo, like how we brought him in, like kind of didn't really make sense, to where Ten Hag wasn't, you know, it came out that we had the chance to sign Isco. We had the chance to sign a few of these other players were offered to Man United and Ten Hag simply said no. Like he said, no, I don't want them. And to where with Sabitzer, if you look at him, I have some stats up compared from last year between him and Eriksson. If you look at passes per game, Eriksson 55, Sabitzer 65. If you look at passing accuracy, Eriksson 82, Sabitzer 84. If you look at final third passes, they're both tied at 20. Chances created per game, 2 for Eriksson, 1 for Sabitzer. Touches per game, 71 for Eriksson, 83 for Sabitzer. So I think in the role that he's coming to play, I think he sort of is that perfect player that adds that little bit of defensive element that Eriksson didn't have. All at the same time, if you go look at some Sabitzer highlights, he scores those worldies. He's willing to get in. He's willing to get forward. I think the reason I'm giving us a D minus, or excuse me, a D or C minus, is because we didn't do enough. Like Sabitzer replaces Eriksson, but if you guys remember, like Donny Van de Beek is out for the entire season. He's done. Like he's not coming back, and we didn't replace him. Like currently, right now, before Sabitzer, our only healthy midfielders were Casemiro, Bruno Fernandes, and Fred. Like that was it. And then young guys. So outside of that, it was like we didn't replace Donny. We replaced Eriksson, but at the same time, it's like we didn't do enough to where we're giving Ten Hag that ammo to go on and win things this year. Like unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, we're playing more games currently than any other team in the Prem. And we're relying on 3 guys who are workhorses that if one more person gets hurt, we're kind of screwed. Mm-hmm. Like if Casemiro gets hurt, like, hey, Sabitzer, welcome to our number 6 role. Like that's your job, man. And so I think that's like, I'm happy that we got him. And I think he's the perfect fit. And I think he's a Ten Hag signing, but I just don't think that we backed him enough. I think the also interesting point is if it didn't come out during January that Eriksson was hurt, there is no shot in hell that we're making a single signing. Yeah. Like we only signed a single player Sabitzer because Eriksson came out and he was hurt till April. And I think that's the issue you currently have with the Man United board is that obviously the Glazers are going to sell, but that's the issue you have is that we needed a player, whether we got Sabitzer or not, even if Eriksson is healthy, and we still chose not to until it came out that he was hurt. And so I think it's frustration. I mean, we've talked about going into Weghorst a little bit. I mean, he's a Ten Hag profile striker. We've mentioned this before. I don't need to go into too much detail. I personally like him. He's cheap. He presses high. He works his ass off. He had more presses in his first week in the Prem than anybody else in the Prem. I think he deserves to have a little bit more chances. I think what's interesting is if you watched our game against Forest yesterday, like when Bruno went out right, Bruno started to serve balls in the box, and like Weghorst came out of the game. So it's like Weghorst has kind of been doing the low man's job of just running his ass off for not a lot of service. I think it's a D minus or D just in terms of what we got for what we need in order to potentially go on and win things with the amount of games that we have this season.
Yeah, I would agree. Hoove, I think you hit it spot on in saying that, you know, January is for reinforcement and you can evaluate a transfer window based on, you know, what does the team need and then what did they do about it. United needed quite a few things. We needed a striker, which you can say that we got in Weghorst if you want to make that argument. But I also think that it was a Martial injury that caused it. I don't think that there was a premeditated, that's what we're going to do. And yes, Ronaldo left, but I still don't think that was enough. I think it was when Martial got injured. That's really what pushed that over. And then we needed a right back. We still do. Delo's not fully back yet. And
he started training today, which is good news.
We've been relying on Wan-Bissaka, but you can't run one position deep or one guy deep on the depth chart, which apparently is the same logic we're applying for our midfield, which is just one level deep in every position. So, you know, I also give it, you know, a D. I'm pretty comfortable with a D. I think the other aspect of the transfer window that we haven't really talked about yet in any of our teams, but timing of transfers also matters to me. Like if you would have told me that like week 1 of the transfer window, we went out and got Veghorst and Sabitzer, I'd be like, fuck yeah. Like, that's great. That's awesome. But waiting all the way until the very last day at the nth hour to get Sabitzer just looks at like a panic signing. And then, he's not ready for, yesterday's game. And then hopefully he's ready this weekend, but we don't even know if that's the case with his visas and, getting settled into the system. So, I think that's also part of the problem, not getting things done quicker. We've talked about this with the Glazers for years and years and years, just having problems on problems with transfers. It was a really disappointing window, and quite honestly, we're where we are right now is like, actually, just like you said, Dobes, we're one player less than we were at the beginning of the season. We can have Weghorst take over Ronaldo's spot. We can have Sabitzer take over Ericsson's spots. We're still down Donnie. We're still down Delo sometimes. So like, we didn't do our job of reinforcement in January, and that's super disappointing. I hate to keep bringing it up, but you did as well. But we're still in four competitions, 3 if you don't want to count the Premier League, but we still want to, finish top 4 in that. We have a lot of games ahead of us, and we do not have the squad for it. That's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, the frustration, like you said it, it's like, if you look at the summer and how United does deals, it took us how long to get an Anthony deal done? It took us months. It took us 3.5 months to get a deal done with Ajax. And then we do a Sabitzer signing in 12 hours.
Yeah.
Like, none of it adds up to where, like, the people that they're making these decisions are incompetent. They're not good at their jobs. They don't know what they're doing. Like, sure, credit for making this happen, but at the same time, like, if United's going to pay Bayern and this guy's not really in the starting 11 for Bayern, they're not going to lose him that much. Like, of course, Bayern's going to give him to us. I think the last point I'll make, and it's going to sound like that cliche thing that you've heard people say, but like, I'm treating Jadon Sancho as like a new signing in January. Like, I truthfully am. Like, it's very cliche, and obviously you hate to sort of like compare that, because obviously he's been at United. He didn't start the season though. He's been with us forever. But like, at the same time, like, him coming back and playing Wednesday and playing as the 10 and coming and getting minutes, like, we need that competition. Like, I'm not even going to get into Anthony, but like, the rotation that we can have now between Rashford playing through the middle, Sancho playing through the left, Sancho potentially playing on the right, and also if he can get back to a world-class level, like, that's just another body that is a dimension that we haven't had. And I think that him coming back into the side now, you have to give the club like so much credit for how they handled it, because it's been the most difficult situation. And I think we're extremely fortunate that he doesn't come into the side in a situation where, like, he has to come in and perform instantly. Like, United's rolling, like, we're winning games, we're playing well, we're playing beautiful football. So we can ease him back into our side and let him sort of get in his groove again, versus him having to come instantly and perform.
Hey, you mentioned it, and now I have to say it. You're treating Jadon Sancho like a new signing. You guys just got another new signing, right? Just
Phil Jones.
Oh no, fresh off bail, yeah.
Jesus.
I saw you smiling, and I knew. I knew
there
exactly
it
what
is.
you were talking about.
I wasn't even gonna say it, but you let it in. You said Jadon Sancho's a new signing. I was like, man, that Mason Greenwood guy looks great.
Jesus, man.
So yeah, it came out today. Greenwood is acquitted of all charges. I mean, I don't think anything other needs.
I didn't mean to put this. I didn't mean to put this conversation on you, but
no, I don't. I think the only way to approach it is there's never a dull week at Manchester United. Like, there's never a dull week. I think United as a club has some big decisions to make with how they handle his situation. And I think the last thing that an Erik ten Hag needs is, if you look at from the start of the season, he dealt with a shitty transfer window. He dealt with a Cristiano Ronaldo. He dealt with a World Cup. He dealt with a Jadon Sancho. And now he has to deal with a Mason Greenwood situation. And he still has us playing like beautiful football, to where, like, I think that's the biggest thing is I said it to you guys this morning. Like, it's very tough to give a take on it without knowing everything that's going on internally. What, like, all we've heard is the tweets and stuff. But I think the biggest thing is, the last thing that we wanted right now is another distraction when we have such a large fixture of games schedule coming up, and we have such like important things to play for, that I think the last thing United as a club needed was the Mason Greenwood situation. And I think that's probably the last thing I'm going to say on it for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. I the club came out today and just said that now that the investigation has come to an end, they're going to handle it internally the way that they see fit, which is incredibly
it's a
vague,
lose-lose. It's a lose-lose.
It's pretty much
situation.
all that you can do in that situation. But overall, I think a D. I'll give it a D plus. Honestly, I think I'll rule ours
It's like
together.
great grades. It's like D minus, D plus.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, you're just pretty much failing. So the one team that we will not touch on, as a group here today, because Chelsea is who we won't touch on, but that's because we're going to be releasing a new segment of this podcast starting next week. What you all have been able to count on this far, listeners, is a consistent Tuesday morning upload. We typically record on Mondays for Tuesday morning drops, and we recap the weekend. We look ahead to games, but it doesn't really leave us all the times for conversations that we want to, and sometimes we don't have the time to dive into specific teams or specific situations. So coming out next week is going to be our very first Mecca Moments segment of this podcast, where Nick and actually Jake Wind is going to come back, and those two are going to break down Chelsea's transfer window. They absolutely obliterated every single record that had ever happened in a January transfer window ever. I think Chelsea collectively spent more than all of the top leagues other than the English Premier League put together. And then they broke the transfer record for a British signing, which is Enzo Fernandez, on the very last day. So they're going to have a lot.
Don't forget it. More transfers than wins.
Don't forget it.
More transfers than wins.
That's very true. So Jake and Nick are going to be talking all through that this weekend. It should be out next week. So stay tuned for those. Mecca Moments are going to be coming out throughout the entire year. You can always count on our consistent Tuesday morning drops. But we're going to move into our last segment quickly here. Butch isn't here tonight, so we're not going to do a factor cap. But what we are going to do is I want to hear from each of you, and I'll give mine as well. Who is your signing of the season so far? And to set the stage, it doesn't necessarily have to be the player of the season. Like we talked about Odegaard, we talked about Haaland, we've talked about those guys, but who is the signing of the season that you saw come into a team, may not be yours, and transform that team that you think is the signing of the season? So whoever wants to start, we're all going to give ours. Who's starting?
I'll go first. If you asked me at the beginning of the season to predict, I would have said
Zinchenko. Give it to me.
I would have said Gabby Jesus.
Just say it.
Yeah, Zinchenko, bro.
Boo.
Truthfully, mine is between three, and it's not even me trying to show bias. Of course, Cassie's mine, but Zinchenko is there with me for very much signing of the season.
Yeah, and I figured one of you guys would take Cassie, so I went with someone from my own team. But we've talked about it on several of the podcast episodes since the World Cup break. But yeah, I think his impact to Arsenal is super clear in the way that we're able to play and move the ball forward, especially up the left side. I won't go too in depth in it, but Zinchenko for sure.
Zinchenko was what? What was his fee that he was? 30
million, maybe like 35 with some add-ons, but 30 I think was the base amount.
Yeah, because I'm always curious with this too, of the signing of the season is how much does it cost as well. And granted, if he comes in and transforms the club and then you win the Premier League, 30 sounds like nothing. But I'm always fascinated with it. So Zinchenko's yours?
Yes, sir.
Non-biased. I love the answer.
I think it's interesting. The way that I'm looking at it is looking at a team and what they were before, and then looking at they were after, and you factor in the price, right? So, the obvious ones, I think Arsenal's doing most of what they're doing now without Zinchenko, but I do think they're better with him. I can't BS all this, but I think Casemiro too is that one's a bigger one to me than Zinchenko, just because of the identity and what he's actually brought and being so in the focal point of the team. Like Zinchenko's great, but as a roaming left back, you can he causes problems. There's no way around it. But I think Casemiro for sure holds that. I'm gonna go with a guy that you might agree with.
Botman?
Like Sven Botman. I also had Bruno Guimaraes in there, but I do think too Newcastle has a little bit of the same identity. I think Bruno really, really takes them to the team that they're at now. So he was my really close one. I think Tyler Adams at Leeds has done things that no one expected him to do, and I think had they actually expected him to do that, he wouldn't be playing at Leeds. So I think we're looking at a piece of unbelievable business by Leeds, a guy that comes in and plays 90 minutes every single game, and is absolutely locked down. One of the best rated players on their team. Captain, he came in, or I don't know if he's actually the captain. No, I think it's someone else, Marco
Luke
Llorente, Ailing. But I think it's almost like a shout, as he probably is kind of something of a captain. Yeah. Like this guy came in and completely took over the midfield, and he is just the Leeds fans are bleeding for him. I think if someone else wants to take a bigger risk on him and a bigger team, he goes in and does the exact same thing at any of the other teams.
I'm with you.
So I think, you can also track a little bit of this transfer of the season as they're going to catch a bag for that kid. And he's going to save them from relegation. So I think that's you want to look at the team before and the team after. Leeds scraped above the relegation zone last year on some last minute heroics that were absolutely unbelievable, but they came into this season looking like most of the same Leeds plus Aronson plus Tyler.
Yep.
Somerville, they made another, like Noto. This kid's an unreal. Like they've made some really, really good business decisions. But I think when you look at the body of the team that plays week in, week out, Tyler Adams has just been insane. Yeah.
It's a great shout. That's great.
I refuse to say Casemiro or Zinchenko. So
it's so funny because I've listened to so many other podcasts and just listened to people talk about this, and I've gone like a million different directions. Like I could see Botman for Newcastle like getting a shout. Like they have the best defensive record out of anybody in the Premier League. They're in the top 4. Nobody expected that of them. I could see Cassie. I mean, I think he'd probably be mine if I had to absolutely pick, just because of what he's done compared to the position, the mentality that he's changed. Like if you look at the stats compared to Rodri, Rice, Partey, Fabinho, all the guys, like Cassie does everything they can do, but he also has 4 goals and 5 assists this year. Like people are downplaying the aspect of what a center defensive midfielder has brought to United. I think you also have to toss Haaland in there. Like, I mean, he's the what he's doing in the Prem is outrageous. I mean, City is not as great. So, but I think at the end of the season, if City comes back and wins the league, like Haaland will be your signing of the season. Like you just kind of go through these different teams of like, I think the one that people aren't thinking of and is extremely important to me, it's such a shame that he got hurt, but up until this point, it's Christian Eriksen.
Yep.
Like the guy has played the most minutes out of
gag me. Fucking gag me.
But on a free. Like you look at the price tag.
Yeah, bro. I know. On a free.
He came to United. He came to United on a free. He's second in the Premier League in assists. He's played the most minutes. He's been absolutely integral into how we've played. If I had to pick, it'd be Casemiro, but it's not just bias. It's just at this point, it's so hard because Zinchenko, the mentality thing, what he brings as a winner to Arsenal, like it's so tough to judge based at this moment. Like I'll probably go Cassie just because of the drastic dynamic that we've changed from the worst United team in the last decade last year to just adding a defensive midfielder and what he brings to our back 6. But I think it's very tough. There's so many players this year that have drastically changed the way that their teams play.
Yeah, I love it. My answer quickly is Casemiro. And I know that that's really biased, but, Dobes on this podcast for the last year and a half, Dobes outside of this podcast, between the two of us, we have been yelling for a 6 at United for years and years and years. And it's just so nice to see the change that he's brought. And you talked about him pretty eloquently, so I won't. But I do want to give 2 shout outs for signings that are going under the radar as potential signings of the season. Nick Pope at Newcastle, 11.5 million for him, by the way, at the beginning of the summer transfer window. Is
probably him and Ramsdale for like team of the season, goalie of the season at this point.
I mean, it's so nuts. And this is not a shot to Ramsdale at all, by the way, but like Ramsdale was what, 30, 40, 50 million. Like he was expensive, and that's fine because as a keeper, you spend that money. But Nick Pope at 11 million, potential signing this season. And then I want to give a shout out to Fulham sitting comfortably in 7th. João Palhinha, their number 6.
Crazy. Yeah.
The highest defensive stats in the Prem, and he was a steal at 20 million. So, you know, a lot of good signings this season, but good to hear. And only the second half of the season will really be able to tell us, you know, who finishes where. But that wraps it for us. Gentlemen, good job today.
Well done.
Mecca fans, you know where to find us. We're on all of the social medias, on the TikTok. We're throwing more polls out there on our Instagram, on our Twitters. We want to hear what you all want to hear. Vote, interact with us, leave some comments, and we'll get some more guests on here. And look out for that Mecca moment coming next week as well. So for all of us, goodbye.
Yeah,
Cheers, fellas.
Cheers.
Cheers, fellas.